The last of this afternoon's programmes for schools and colleges, Merry-Go-Round, begins in 1 minute.
Hello. This program's about food, and I'm just getting ready to cook a meal. It's a meal that you might like to cook sometime, too. It's very easy, very tasty, and anyone can do it. We'll be giving you the ingredients later on in the program, and with plenty of time to make a note of them, too. But first, what about the title of this program? You are what you eat. It sounds a bit like a riddle, doesn't it?
Hello, Max.
Hello, Pam.
Well, that's really what it is. A riddle, a kind of a quiz, and we're not going to tell you the answer till much later on. See if you can work it out for yourself. See if you can guess why we say you are what you eat as we go on.
But don't worry about it. We'll tell you why we did it at the end of the program after the recipe.
Well, actually, there's more to our quiz than just one riddle. Come over here, because I've got some questions for you. You see, when we started to find out about food, what we discovered, first of all, were lots of surprises. Well, here's the first surprise and the next question in our quiz. There aren't any prizes for guessing what those are. But there is one thing that all those cars need to keep them working, isn't there? Without one thing, they'd all stop. Well, right, of course, petrol, fuel for their engines, because all machines need fuel of some sort to make them work, to drive them along. But what about this? There's a machine here that certainly isn't using petrol. So the next question is, what's driving the bike? It's not the pedals, is it? Because on their own, they couldn't do anything. There's one thing that a bike just must have to make it move. Right again. Without a rider, there's no way the bicycle can move. The bike's a machine, and the rider is a bit like the engine of the machine. But it was the next question that had me foxed. Where did the human engine on that bicycle machine get its fuel from? Because you don't see cyclists tanking up at filling stations now, do you?
Well, here's some fuel. Would you believe that when you eat food, one of the things that you're doing is taking on fuel to keep working?
Well, I believe it now you've told me, but it is a bit of a surprise, isn't it, to think that food, like a biscuit, can be fuel for an engine?
Well, I needed some convincing too, so our model builder came along and produced this for me.
Well, it's a sort of model engine, isn't it?
Yes, that's what it is. In fact, it's a steam engine. But Pam, just have a look at this. To make it go, the engine needs a fire under the boiler to make steam. The steam pushes the wheels round and makes the engine do its work. Our engine has a wood fire. Wood burns brightly in the air. But now the fire is all burnt out. The wood is used up and the engine has stopped. So we put a biscuit in the firebox. Biscuit doesn't burn on its own. It needs help. This hose blows a draft of special gas taken from the air to keep it going. With that extra oxygen gas from the air, the biscuit makes a lovely fire. And so, there's plenty of steam. And the steam engine works perfectly.
Well, Max, that machine certainly takes the biscuit.
Oh, Pam. But you do get the point, don't you? That the biscuit makes very good fuel, and so does lots of other food.
But that's all very well to call food fuel just because the biscuit makes the engine work. But you saw for yourself, didn't you, what happened when the fuel under the boiler ran out? The engine just stopped. And that doesn't happen to us, does it? Because we can keep going for a very long time without having to stoke up on biscuits or any other kind of food.
Well, perhaps we could make that another question in our quiz. What happens to human beings when they haven't got any food to eat?
Well, that's almost so easy, it's almost silly, but I do see the point you're trying to make, that just like cars, we have a kind of spare tank for taking along some extra fuel should we need it, although it does look as if this poor man's almost run out, doesn't it? Do you know where the human fuel tank is? Have you got it yet? Where do we keep our food reserves? Well, that's right, of course. We pack it away as fat around our middle or anywhere all around our body. Any extra fuel that the body can't use straight away, it turns into fat and stores up.
And that made me think about cars again. There wouldn't be much point in designing a really streamlined racer, beautiful, sleek and fast, and then sticking on a whacking great fuel tank just so that it could run for ages without having to stop to get topped up, would there?
Well, our food expert told us that this chap's tank's enough to keep him going for months. And if he wants to become a streamlined racer again, well, he's got to get himself a smaller tank, and that means not eating more food each day than his body really needs.
Well, actually, Pam, that might not be quite true, because there are some people who can't get thin even if they starve themselves completely. And of course, they're not well and should see a doctor. But most people get fat because they give their body machine more fuel than it needs to be going on with.
So there you are. Food is fuel for our body machines. But there's a lot more to food than that. Just think again about machines like cars.
You mean another question for our quiz?
That's right. Now, apart from a driver and petrol, what else do machines like cars need to keep them running? Well, there are a great many things, mostly under the bonnet, like antifreeze and water for the radiator. Water for the washers, and more specially clean water for the battery. Oil for the works of the engine. And air for the tires. And of course there are lots of other things. And if the car breaks down, then someone has to mend it.
Cars really do need rather a lot of attention, don't they? And so do all machines. Sooner or later, they're going to need some attention. But there is one exception. I wonder if you can guess what it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of sales talk. I'm not going to make wild, exaggerated claims about this fantastic machine. I'm just going to let its advantages speak for itself. Now, most machines need special fuel, like petrol for cars, like diesel oil for lorries, like coal for steam engines. Well, you know the list. But this incredible machine actually runs on any variety of fuels, and all of them are easy to obtain.
Runs on natural fuel.
Now, most machines need constant attention. This machine will run for years and years and will do most of its own repairs.
Self-repairing.
This incredible machine actually grows in size to cope with extra work that it has to do.
Self-building.
And everything that this amazing self-building, self-repairing machine needs in order to keep running smoothly for years and years on end can be tipped in through just one filler. That means that you don't have to sort out its supplies for it. It does that itself.
Only one filler.
Well now, my dear ladies and gentlemen, the great moment has arrived. I am about to reveal for your own eyes only the greatest machine of all time. And I bet you've guessed it already.
It's me, folks.
One filler.
Well, yes, all the food that you eat goes in through one filler, doesn't it?
Oh, your mouth, that's right. You win. It does make you think, though, hasn't food got a lot of jobs to do because it's got to be fuel to keep you working, it's got to make repairs to your body, it's got to build you up as you grow.
And don't forget, it has to keep you healthy, to fight off disease, I mean. Well, let's just leave our quiz for the moment. We asked our food expert to explain how food can do all of those things, and the answer we got was quite a surprise. What we were told is that foods can be divided up according to the jobs they do, and there are 4 main groups. For example, these foods are best as fuel. They top you up and keep you going between meals. Well, there's bread, potatoes, and sweet things. And most of these help with other jobs too, except sugar. Sugar is just fuel and nothing else. They all go into your tank and they fill it up pretty quickly too. Then over here, we have foods which are best at building up teeth and bones. And they've all got one thing in common, haven't they? There's milk, cheese, and yogurt. Well, they're all dairy foods, aren't they? They all come from milk. And over here, there are foods that are best at flesh building. And I bet you notice something odd here too, don't you? Well, you've seen those before, haven't you? And that surprised me too at first, until I found out that cheese was good at repairing and building both bones and flesh. Then there are these other good flesh-building foods. There's meat, fish, eggs, and up here, certain kinds of beans, the starchy ones, like baked beans. And then over here, there's nuts. And they're all good at building and repairing flesh. Well, that's 3 of our main groups. And there's one more, the one that helps you stay healthy. And fruit and vegetables can do that. If you eat them, it's rather like giving your car a good clean and then a coating of rust-preventing fluid. It stops things that are going to do harm and keeps the car in good condition.
Certainly makes it all a lot simpler when you see it like this, doesn't it? Although, one thing became clear to me then, when I saw it all laid out like this.
What was that?
Well, because food has got so many different jobs to do, it would be no good eating just one kind of food. Like, I love apples and oranges. I could eat them till they come out of my ears, but that would be no good because they would only be doing one of the 4 jobs that food has to do. So, how do you know that you're actually eating all the right food to provide your body with everything that it needs? Well, our food expert told us to go back and look at the 4 groups of food again. And providing you just have a couple of things from each of these groups every day, well, you can just have what you fancy and what you can afford.
Well, this is the recipe bit, and maybe you'd like to take notes. We decided that we'd like to cook a sort of lunch or dinner for 4 people. And we also decided that we'd like a hot part to the meal, and then with something else to follow after that. Our expert told us we could use anything we wanted, provided we used some of the things from each of the 4 food groups. So, the first thing we thought we'd look at was fuel, food for energy.
Well, Max and I both like potatoes. They're jolly good food, and so that's where we decided to get our fuel from. But don't forget that this is where most of the spare fuel for your fatty fuel tank comes from, so just 1 potato each.
And that's where we came in. Now, to make the potatoes interesting, we decided that we'd have them baked in their jackets. Apart from anything else, it saves a lot of work peeling them. One little job to do to the potatoes before they go in the oven, and that is to stab them with a fork. That prevents them from bursting with the heat inside the oven. There we are. And then put them onto a baking tray, and then we'll put those into the oven. And they go on the top shelf in the oven, which is the hottest part. In they go. Close the door, and then you turn the dial to gas mark 4, or to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, or to 180 degrees centigrade. And the potatoes, you noticed I put them in a cold oven so there was no danger of burning my hands. They can now be getting on with their job, and we can be getting on with the rest of the meal. The potatoes will take just about 1 hour to cook.
And we thought we'd have a little margarine melted on our hot potatoes as well, and that's all right because that comes from this fuel food group as well. In fact, margarine's a little better than butter because it belongs to the protection foods too. Well, onto the main part of the meal. We want some bone builder. So, how about some cheddar cheese right down here at the front? And onto the bodybuilders. Well, quite fancy some boiled ham, don't you? And something else from this section. Baked beans, just because I like them. And I see we've got our old friend cheddar cheese here again, so in fact we're doing quite well in this department because it's a bodybuilder too. Over to you, Mr. Cook.
Right. I've just finished opening, or I have now, a tin of baked beans. There we are. And I've used a nice, safe tin opener so that I don't cut my fingers. Also, be careful when you take the lid out of the tin because the edges of that lid can be very, very sharp indeed. That's a 500-gram tin of baked beans, which, in other words, is enough for 4 people. Now, the next thing you need is an oven-proof dish, and I'm using an oven-proof glass dish so I can see what's happening. Right, in with the beans. Get them all out. That's fine. Now, the next item we need is cheese, and that's 150 grams of cheese. And if you haven't got any scales, well, that's what 150 grams of cheese looks like. It's about the size of a big chocolate bar. And the cheese needs to be cut up into, well, nice little cubes, nice bite-sized pieces, something like that. But to save time, I've already got some chopped up here. You can see them there, already chopped up to go in with the beans. So in they go. We're using cheddar cheese, but you can use any kind of hard cheese that you like. They're all good for building up bones and flesh. And the next thing in our recipe is ham. This is boiled ham, it's already cooked, and there's 100 grams of that, or in other words, 4 slices. And also, to save time, I've got that chopped up too in a dish, ready to go straight in with the cheese and the beans, so in that goes. You don't have to use cooked ham if you don't want to. You can use any kind of cooked meat. The only rule is it must be cooked, not raw. You can use scraps left over from the Sunday joint, or cooked sausages, or even frankfurters. They're very nice too. Having mixed that all together, the only thing we need now is a lid. And if you're like me, and you haven't got a lid, you can use a piece of kitchen foil. It works just as well. Pull that neatly down, all around the edges of the dish like that, and it makes a very, very good lid. And the next step is to put the dish into the oven. Now please, just to be safe, ask a grown-up to do this for you, because that oven's very, very hot indeed. Okay, in with a hot pot. Well, there we are. And that hot pot will take just half an hour to cook, which is not nearly as long as the potatoes will take.
Well, I bet you think we've forgotten something. Have you spotted what we've missed? Well, of course, we haven't got anything from this last and very important group of foods that protect us against illness. And that's the part that I'm going to be dealing with, because I'm going to make a salad with some celery, that's this vegetable, down here. And how about some crushed pineapple, just to make it all sweet and juicy? Well, obviously, the celery needs a good wash, so you can divide the sticks up and give them a good scrub. Usually, a good guide is about half a stick of celery per person. So if you've got 4 people, that's 4 halves, 2 sticks of celery, and that's what I've got cut up here in the bowl. Now, to that, I just have to add the pineapple. You give that all a nice stir, and there's your salad. Lovely, it smells too.
Well, let's just check and see how we're doing. Remember, the rule is that you've got to try and give yourself something from each of the 4 food groups every day. Well, what about fuel? We've got potatoes, and we're going to add margarine later on, so that part's okay. And then we've got cheese for the bone builders, so we're all right there. And the flesh builders, well, they're doing very well. We've got 3 of those. We've got meat, we've got cheese again, and we've got baked beans. And in our salad, we've got fruit and vegetables, so we're okay for health.
So does that mean that we can have anything we like to follow on with?
Well, yes, it does, but I'm not going to have too much sweet stuff because sugar's only good as fuel. So I think I'll go for something, I know, another bone builder. I'll have a milkshake.
Well, I think I need a little extra resistance to illness. In any case, I do fancy an orange.
Well, it looks very nice, too. Come on, let's go and see how that meal's getting
Yeah, it
along.
should be ready now, shouldn't it?
Right. Keep your fingers crossed.
Oh, it smells good.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Do ask an adult, just to be safe, to take the hot dishes out of the oven for you. You can see I've used oven gloves, but that dish is really very, very hot.
Yes, and so is this one with the potatoes, so the same goes for this. Now, with the potatoes, if you get a knife, and just give it a cut, like a cross in the top there, and then squeeze gently.
What a clever girl.
Oh, look at that, isn't that nice? There's a nice space then to put the butter in, or marge.
Can people use butter if they want to?
Well, yes, I don't see why not, because that's a good fuel too, isn't it?
Oh, right.
Do you mind your fingers with this? It's a bit
Well,
hot.
that looks very good. Well, your bit's all right. Shall we have a look at this one now? Are you ready for this?
Right.
Hey, presto. Merry-go, look at that. Merry-go-round hot pot.
Fantastic.
It looks great.
Really looks good. Do you want some salad to go with
Oh,
it? Look.
yes, please. Listen, I'm very
Yeah.
pleased with that, aren't you?
It's very good.
Well, you can see how easy it is to plan a meal.
And I'm afraid that that's all we've got time for today, but we do hope that you have fun making your merry-go-round meal. And don't forget these hot plates, will you?
Well, listen, we've forgotten the main question in our quiz.
Oh, we have.
You are what you eat, the title of our programme.
Well, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? I'm sure you've worked it out, because bones that are built from milk and cheese and yogurt and flesh that comes from meat and fish and nuts. You started off tiny and we grew big, and the only thing we had to do it with was food.
That's right. Food gives your body its building materials. So, you are what you eat. Bye.
Bye.
On BBC Two now, there's coverage of Crown Green Bowling's most prestigious competition, the Waterloo. This is BBC One, and now the time just coming up to 3 minutes past 3, we're returning to a trade test transmission.